In this morning's session, we will discuss the true state of the church after Donald Trump. Also, did the coronavirus highlight divides within the church? We will discuss. Also, entrepreneur and political analyst C. Bella. She will discuss her launching of her new website, and we will get into that. So you are in the right place at the right time, and it's an early rise, grand rising. You are in the session, so stay woke. It's the early talk wake up session. Let's get to work.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring.
I'm going to lift you. I'm going to keep you when you can't keep yourself. Why? Because of your sacrifice. Those eyes have not seen, nor ears heard, nor has it entered into the heart of man the things which God has prepared for those who love him. So on Tuesday, when I go to the Capitol and do this invocation, I'm going to say, thank God for their sacrifice. And I'm going to pray God's principle that he will elevate their families, that he will bless them in a mighty way because of their sacrifice. Understanding this, it's through your sacrifice, Genesis, that we are here today.
Es un placer poder estar en la santa casa del Señor.
It is a pleasure to be in the holy house.
¿Sabes qué? Dios va a hacer milagros en esta noche.
God is going to do miracles
Ya
tonight.
está haciendo milagros.
He is already doing miracles.
Correspondo por el nombre de David
My name is David
Junior Maldonado,
Junior Maldonado,
pastor de la iglesia La Maravilla del Éxodo,
pastor of the church La Maravilla del Éxodo,
el 302 de Elton en East New York,
302 of Elton,
por la
East New
gracia de
York.
Dios.
By the grace of God,
Estoy aquí con permiso de mi apóstol y mi pastora,
I'm here with the permission of my apostle and my pastor,
porque yo también me debo autoridad.
because I also have authority.
Yo no me escondo ni me voy a ninguna cueva sin que mis pastores lo sepan.
I don't hide and I don't go to any caves without my pastor knowing.
Por lo tanto, hay que tener cuenta, hay que dejarle saber a los
And
pastores.
so we have to let our pastors know,
Porque si algo pasa,
because if something happens,
ellos tienen que dar cuenta.
they have to respond.
Le dejo esta
We
palabra.
want justice in the righteous way. Allah is in heaven and he sees and he will pay. Therefore, we need unity now. We need unity. We don't need to fight. We need unity. All of us come together. I come in peace, and I want to be in peace with my Bangladesh community in order to get justice for our brothers that lost their life earlier today. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Blessings.
Good morning, everybody. It is my pleasure to introduce to you two Christian brothers. Number one, he's from the Wonders of Exodus Church, Bishop David Maldonado, and also from the Genesis Church in Sacramento, California, the president of the Sacramento branch of the National Action Network, Reverend Tecoy Porter. Good morning. How are you? I wanted to I wanted to bring this home. I wanted to basically bring it to everybody's attention because everybody is thinking it. Whether you go to church every Sunday or you don't go to church every Sunday. I believe there's some issues that are out there that we can speak to. According to nymag.com, in the end, white Christian America stood by its man. The exit polls present an imperfect but definitive picture. At least 3/4 of white evangelicals voted for Donald Trump in November, a figure largely unchanged from 2016. Evangelicals didn't win Trump another 4 years in power, but not for lack of effort. While most of America tired of the president's impities, the born-again found themselves a higher tolerance for sin. After the absolute support of white evangelicals for Donald Trump, how does the black and brown church worship alongside the evangelicals, Christians?
Dr. Porter, you can take that.
Okay. Well, put me on the spot. Well, first of all, it's great to be here, and thank you, brothers, for inviting me to be a part of this program. Well, I have some close white evangelical friends, and I would dare say even family, and like all family squabbles, family fights, and I think over the 4 years of Trump, what we found was another family squabble that occurred. And I was deeply disappointed with the silence that I received from them in regards to a number of efforts, both locally and nationally. I was deeply disturbed by their seemingly acceptance of this, I would say, a crazy man, leading our country, very delusional in many of his things and not representative of what we claim to believe as Jesus is Lord. With that said, I think there's a lot of work to do, in terms of our relationship against Black church and white church, Black, brown church, and the white evangelicals. As there was work to do beforehand, we cannot rush to reconciliation. We have to deal with the issue at hand. I think that's what I think a lot of the our white evangelical friends are trying to do. They would like to do, just to act like, oh, it didn't even happen. The Trump years and what it kind of brought out right there. And so we have to, and I've challenged them on this. I said, we cannot rush to reconciliation. We have to deal with those issues. And at the same time, we cannot be disappointed if they aren't willing to deal with those issues. If a person says who they are the first time, believe it. And I think we need to go ahead and believe it, not trying to make them come around to that, but then understand, as Black and brown churches and people of faith, this is where they stand. We may have to love them from afar and keep it moving.
Bishop Maldonado?
I agree with what Dr. Porter stated. It's very hard for some Christians to agree, but the true Christians will have to learn to agree and let them do what they have to do, but us as Christians also stand on what the Bible states. I've always learned that to adapt or to take from a conversation the truth or what's good and throw away the rest. I don't have to sit here and argue with my brother, my sister, regardless of this color, regardless of who, what faith, where they come from. It's no need to argue. We just need to stand on the rock and understand that everyone is not going to think the way we do.
Obviously, that some Christians feel that Donald Trump was actually sent from God. And they feel that the phrase God uses imperfect vessels. And that was some of their justification to vote for Trump. What would you say for the people who are using scripture, if you will, to justify their vote and support for Trump, and they're using that to other Christians? They're repeating words out of the Bible to justify their vote to other Christians. Bishop Maldonado, what would you say about that?
The devil speaks in tongue does not mean he's speaking from God. You have to learn how to have discernment. Not because you're spitting out scriptures or you're reading out the scriptures, it means that it goes in the contents of whatever's going on in the world at this moment in this time. And people are confused. There's a lot of people coming out the woodworks, becoming Christians and reading the Bible in 2.5 seconds and don't understand what's going on in the Bible. You have to swim in the Bible to understand what's going on. Even us, that I'm a bishop, Dr. Porter, I'm sure that every time we read a scripture, we learn something new every time that we read it. So the Bible is not something to pound somebody on, hit somebody on the head with it and argue about it. To be honest with you, on this conversation, on all this time that Donald Trump was president, I didn't have time to argue with no one. There's no need. The Bible states that there'll be people coming in dressed up as sheep in wolf clothing. This is what tells me is that some of us have to learn discernment. Instead of copying, instead of fighting, instead of competing with other pastors, other church members, let's start praying more and learning to discern. Because when we discern, things like this will not happen with Christians. I'm upset at the church now for letting a lot of things happen. But at the end of the day, that's not my job to pull people in and hit them in the head. No, I got to pray just like we do. And if I have to say something, I will say it with the love of Christ.
I like that word, discernment. It's very difficult for some people to even have natural discernment, if you will. Like some people have a hard time with that. What would you tell people on how to use their discernment when it comes to wolves in sheep's clothing?
Well, so it really depends on where you're at, in your walk with the Lord, in your study. Also, we got to take into the fact that we all come at this, we approach the Bible from a different lens, as a Black man, as a Hispanic individual, as a white person, Asian, Indian. The Bible is an Eastern text. The Bible is it's a simple yet complicated book, and you can approach it in so many ways. And that's why Paul says we see it through this lens darkly, right? So we don't grasp the whole revelation of God. So that leaves a lot of room for what we call in theological terms, eisegesis, which is not really a negative thing. There's exegesis, which you're are interpreting the Bible literally and contextually, if you will. But then there's eisegesis, where you place your experience into the Bible and you draw upon it from what you have. Well, we just saw blatantly, we're giving too much credit to what happened in the 4 years with Trump. All they did was they used the Bible and scripture to back up what they wanted, which is what you call eisegesis to the negative, as the most negative form. And this is this is not new. People use the Bible to justify slavery. People use the Bible to justify putting women down. They use the Bible in many ways, and to go against people of other races and things like that. And so we have to watch them. And so discernment comes then from the point of, okay, what does God say? What does Jesus say? And he gives us two rules. He says, love your neighbor as you love yourself. And then first says, love God, then love your neighbor as you love yourself. If it doesn't fall into that, then there's something wrong going on here. And so, so if I'm not loving my neighbor, and if somebody that's calling themselves a Christian is not showing that love to me, then there's something wrong. There's something wrong in there. All right. The Bible tells us, and they'll know that we are Christians by our love. Right. And so we have to understand what Jesus did. He did everything through love. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, to whosoever shall believe in him shall not perish, but have everlasting life.
COVID was a real big deal, and I'm sure it hit a lot of church communities very hard. And but when it all went down, why was it COVID that that highlighted the divides of the country, and including the church? Why did it highlight those type of divides, in your opinion?
Well, COVID, what it did, it stopped the world. It literally, put the world on pause. So everything shut down, right? So work shut down, stores shut down, churches, quote unquote, shut down. And all people could do was see what was happening now. Now you had to pay attention to racism. Now you had to pay attention to police abuse. Now you had to pay attention to other things, your family, and deal with issues that the world before pre-COVID allowed you to escape from, because I had to go to work, I had to do this, I'm busy with my life. But now everything was still, and you could not ignore a George Floyd. Now the world is still, and you cannot ignore, just blatant Trumpism going on and stuff. Now you can't ignore all of the ills of the world and gloss over them. And so I believe that's what the pandemic did. The pandemic, I think, just highlight that, all those ills, and that's why we see this huge impact upon of everything now, because the world was on pause. We can be ignored.
Bishop, do you believe COVID was sent from God? And from now, I know that's a wild question, but it is all over the internet, and there are people in the church that some of them may be confused with that. Also, and also, can you put with that question, can you educate people also on the history of the Bible when it came to plagues? I think that was where the history of the Bible, when it came to plagues, I think they kind of latched that on to the COVID-19 virus. What do you think about that?
My personal opinion, God did not, he did not send this plague. He allowed it two different things. The Reverend was just speaking that the world was on pause. Coming out of COVID, or we're still in it. COVID destroyed families under quarantine. COVID destroyed lives. COVID destroyed people from going to church. When we come back into the church, there's going to be less people in the church. So there goes your answer. God multiplies and adds. The only one who takes and subtracts is the enemy. So this plague was allowed. We had to stop. We had to pause. The Reverend stated a lot of things were going on in 2019. We were just not focused on it because we had so much going on. Our plates were full. God wanted our attention. He allowed this to happen in order to see what we were going to do, because he knows what's going to happen tomorrow, but he wanted to see what we were going to do after. Now, after all of this is said and done, the digital era is here, which is Zoom. The digital era is here now. A lot of people are not going to go to church because now they're comfortable in watching this the way we're in this meeting. So why do I got to go to church? They were already watching church live on TV. Some people didn't even go to church because they were watching TD Jakes, which God bless them. They were watching Joe Osteen. They were watching other ministers, and they would not congregate. Now it's worse. Now we got Zoom. Now all the churches are now going to start putting Zoom for people to stay home. So this is a plot of the enemy to bring, to take people away. Now, on the plague situation, the first plague that I could remember in the Bible was the plague upon Egypt. And he allowed that. He gave authorization to Moses. He authorized Moses. But we can't compare that to now. That was in the past. We're in grace now. That was in the law. We're in grace. This is the issue that's going on with our people that are not educated. They think that we're still in the law, and they keep running the Old Testament and not understand that we're not. That's for the other people. We're now in grace. We're in the New Testament. And if you ask me which one is worse, I'd rather be in the law. But we're in the grace.
Reverend, you have anything to add to that?
Well, I think we have to be careful to try to say that we know the mind of God in these things, and discussing absolutes. There's an old hymn of the church that says, we'll understand it better by and by. And I think that's, once we get some years past this, then we'll start to see some of what God meant through this. I think we're starting to see some of it now. But, God also grows things through pruning. And so, it's a cutting away. And whatever you cut is painful, right? It's painful in order to grow from this. And so I personally see this as a pruning, as a cutting away. God's doing something to always bring us to another level, another revelation in him. And it's yet to be seen what that truly is.
For people that are not into the scripture, for people who are not, let's say, I think you guys call it the Easter Sunday people that come in. You only see them once a year. For those people, do you think that for them, maybe their belief in God isn't the way others are? Do you think, and maybe it's along what the Reverend just said, do you think it was a bad look? And do you think now is a time for the church to rebrand itself and become leaders again?
this is the moment. If there was ever such a tough moment, the moment is now. We're at the moment where we will find out who is who. This is that moment. With everything that happened, it just took one man to stir the pot. All of this was the feelings of people throughout the years, but no one really had the guts to come out and express the way they felt. It took one man to get on TV to point his views or state whatever he stated to divide the nation. Divide the nation to a point where you had Christians arguing with other Christians. In the beginning of this Zoom, you stated that the Christians were actually, to say, betting on that God actually called this man to run the nation. And I have my personal views on that. I don't think, from reading the Bible, it says to take care of those, the immigrants. The Bible states that. And he was actually going to cancel. He wanted to cancel these people. That's dividing. That's dividing. A man of God is to put everything together. A man sent by God is to put things together. And we also have to be careful too, because the Bible states that the Antichrist is going to do so much miracles that people are going to get confused. So we have to be careful.
You know, I really thought about the Antichrist during the Trump presidency. I was really, you know, I was really thinking, like, what is because you had Christians really talking about the state of Israel and how when Trump was going to make the capital in Israel, and there were Christians that were saying this was the hand of God, and this was what was supposed to happen. And this had occurred about 2 years into his presidency, where this happened, and to think that that Christians thought that it was his calling to do that for the state of Israel. How important, Reverend, is the Black Lives Matter movement to the church?
Well, I think it's it's very important, to be honest, because it shows us a couple of things. One is the disconnect of the church to our children, if you will. You know, because the children, the kids, the Black Lives that's marching and calling out Black Lives Matter are children and youth that are our children, but not a part of our church, you know. And so it shows a disconnect here. The Black Lives Matter movement is the only civil rights and social justice movement that's not church-led. It's not church-led. And historically, you know, we were there. We were there on the front lines, leading. And so that shows you some of the discrepancies that the Black church has fallen into through the period of, I would say, Clinton, then he had Bush, we kind of went back into it, then Obama. You know, Obama kind of put everybody to sleep in that we thought we were past everything, right? Everything's post-racial, you know, kumbaya, reconciled, and we finally made it because we had a Black president, you know. And I was one of those too. I was like, yay, we did it 8 years, you know. And throughout that 8 years, Trump came, and I think it was just a building up of nah, it's like the last bastion of white supremacy that said, hey, you're not going to get rid of us that easily. You can't just get rid of over 400 years of thought and oppression and supremacy in 8. so we're coming back with the Trump. I see him as a symptom, and the opportunity for those people to be heard and recognized. And so the Black Lives Matter movement kind of shone the light on all of that and where the church is within our own, the Black church is within our own people, our own society, and then where it's at in general society. So right now, the Black Lives Matter, it tells us that we need to reconnect with our children. We need to reconnect with our purpose. We need to reimagine ourselves again. And a lot of it's a homecoming, coming back to what made the Black church powerful in the first place. That we're not just an organization of faith, but that faith fueled social justice, faith fueled education, faith fueled empowerment financially, faith fueled businesses, and all that. All of that came out of the Black church back in the day, and we got away with that because we thought we made it. And Black Lives Matter said, nah, nah, we ain't made nothing.
Bishop, what's the relationship? Obviously, there's a lot of churches around the country have Souls to the Polls, and it was an organized movement for folk that go to church on a Sunday, and they organized obviously to go from the church to the voting booth. Now they're really trying to break that down in certain parts of the country. They're actually, in my view, trying to get rid of that because of the laws that they're passing regarding voting. How do you think the church should approach that? Because basically what they're doing is that through the state, they're trying to disqualify the votes of brown and black people from the church.
I tell you the truth. The church is the spinal cord of the community. What we say go. We just haven't tapped into the power that we have. And we saw it with Martin Luther King, the great Martin Luther King. We saw it with the great Malcolm X. Powerful leaders that came behind a religion. Whether you want to call it a mosque, I call it a church. It's a mosque, but it's a church. They had power on moving people, not manipulating, moving people, numbers. And the government, the state understands that we have power in numbers. So for them to get what they want, they eliminate a lot of things and put laws in and take it away because they understand that the minority is no longer the minority, we're the majority. And if we actually step outside, the issue is there's too many chiefs and not enough Indians. I'm an Indian. As long as the chief up there is guiding us the right way, I don't care who's guiding us. If we unite, we can put a stop to everything that's going on.
Also, I'm going to say, I think a lot of people are thinking like I was, that both the gun and the taser would be put on your dominant side, but it's not that way.
They have to cross where they have them different.
So you actually have to reach across yourself to
you
get
feel
the
the difference. I
yeah,
mean,
it's definitely
there's just no
discernible
comparison. As I say, they're not making tasers in this yellow color anymore. They're making in black. They're making them yellow. Now, how she made the difference was she shot that poor guy to death, saying, "This is what I thought. This is what I thought was my taser." And if you can't tell the difference in the feel of those things, it's crazy. Anyhow, she deserves. But I am pro-police, folks. I think we need the police. We need their servants, and they do a good job. But if they don't stop this onslaught, they cannot do this. The police in Virginia picked up a lieutenant in the Army and began to give him trouble. And our state police are highly trained. But why they don't stop this? And this thing is going on in Minnesota, but the Derek Chauvin, I mean, they ought to put him under the jail. He has caused so much trouble by kneeling on the death of George Floyd. It's just, on his neck. It's just terrible what's happening. And the police, why don't they open their eyes to what the public relations are? They've got to stop this stuff.
Well, it was big news. You're exactly right. It was big news when Pat Robertson has said that. I think, Pat Robertson carries a lot of baggage, with it. And then he's older. So I hate to say that we dismiss our older folks, but we do. We do dismiss them. And but I do think it had more impact in that circle than we give credit for. And I think we saw that, with the verdict of Derek Chauvin. You could not look at that and say that man was not guilty. That was a lynching by knee, as Reverend Al Sharpton says. It was a lynching by knee. 9 minutes and 29 seconds, something like that. It's more than the 8 minutes that we thought. 9 minutes, almost 10 minutes of that man just sitting there with the knee on his neck. And so you could not look away. You could not say that was, not intentional. There was no malice behind that. That was not murder. You could believe your eyes at this point. And the Derek Chauvin trial said that yes, we can. And the verdict said yes, we can believe our eyes. And that, we also need to review what was said before. There's a problem in policing in America. And so I think more and more people, not just Black folks, but white folks, Asians, all that, are now understanding the issue of racial violence in our police system. And we're seeing now a new civil rights movement where it's not just about Black folks now, but everybody's involved, because everybody's getting attacked and everybody's feeling the effects of racial violence within policing in America.
There's a teenage child growing up without a mother. There is a teenage boy growing up without a father. More now than at any other time because of the COVID. There was a recent article that said that the numbers are outrageous. And so what do you say, Bishop, to that young man, to that young woman who is coming up at a time like this that sees a lot of conflict around? What's the way for that person?
More mentoring programs, more people. This is the problem or the issue, that we have a lot of people who want to give advice but don't live their life. They don't practice what they preach, and they're not an example of what they teach. And if it's one thing that the people from outside see, is that we're not united and that we don't have our stuff correct. Now, when I say that, I speak in general. So when a young man or a young lady, as leaders, we approach them, they either accept us with open hands because they know and they see how we react and what we do. But when they close up on us is because we don't practice what we preach and we're not an example of what we teach. So we have to be very careful because we have a lot of people out there just guiding our children to the wrong thing, and they call themselves leaders. And as a leader, we need to understand also that we need to watch what we do and how we do it, how we talk, because we have people who are looking at us, and it's always the young generation. That's why the new generation doesn't want to bother with some of these ministers who are out here, because they see what they do behind the scenes. They see what they did to granny, auntie, everyone who went to church or whoever went to church, and they don't want to come back. So now it makes it harder for people who really care, who really work with passion, love, and restoration to restore the people under God's grace and favor. It's hard for us. We got to work double because of other individuals who did the wrong thing. But to go to your question, we need to sit our youth down and guide them in the right path. Speak their language. That's the way to get to the youth. When they feel that you're speaking their language, you're speaking to them and not at them. Am I correct? Speaking at them or to them, either or, I'm sorry. They feel that they have a bond with you. I get ridiculed because I stay outside. I stay learning the new lingo. I stay learning the new music because my generation is the youth. So when I come to the youth and I'm able to talk their lingo, their slang, their words, it's like, Bishop, we ain't, yeah, I know that. I know what's going on. And they adapt. I'm not trying to be young. What I'm trying to do is speak at their level, just like Jesus did. Jesus spoke at everyone's level. And that's why the people came and they walked with him and they followed him, because he understood the people.
Reverend, there is a senior citizen out there who maybe have lost their sons, or they have lost their daughters. Maybe it was to gun violence, or maybe it was to COVID. And they're going through a tough time. They're older. Maybe they're afraid to go back to church because they feel, they're nervous about the mask mandates and things of that nature. What would you tell those people who are used to being able to go to church, but now they're a little nervous about stepping back into the church?
Right. So, what I've been telling folks that match your description and otherwise is I'm saying to get vaccinated, first of all. I'm saying let's go ahead and trust our health officials, trust God first and our health officials, and let's go ahead and get vaccinated. Do everything that you can within your power to be safe. So that's the one thing, the first thing that you need to do so that you can live, especially those in our Black or brown communities, our seniors who've been disproportionately impacted by this horrible disease. And then when you're ready to move, when you're ready to come back, we're going to be ready for you. And the church is here. This is an incredible opportunity, again, for us to welcome back not just the old, but the new. Because we've reached a few other people, some more folks, through our new internet, TVs, and what have you, they're watching. And when the doors do open a little more freely, we're going to see some new faces, and we got to be prepared. We got to be prepared where they know it's safe. That sanctuary is indeed sanctuary. It's safe here. Not, we're going to be mindful of regulations, even after they open things up. We can't. We're not going to be able to do things like we used to. Know that we have to be a little more mindful of laying of hands. We have to be a little more mindful of the length of our services. We have to be more mindful of spacing and all that. I think we're going to be. We have to understand that. Okay, we need a hybrid church. That every church is going to be a multi-campus church, if you will, with your physical brick and mortar location, and then also your virtual location. You want to keep that up, stay investing in those things, so that if grandmother does not come back, we still got her, we still have her. And then we have to say, okay, now even more so, church is not just Sunday morning, but it's a 7-day-a-week thing. What this does, what Zoom has allowed us, now I can reach more people because we live busy lives. Let's just face it. We live busy lives. Mom, if there are 2 people adults in the household, they working. For most of our congregants, might be a single parent, and they working. 2 or 3 jobs. So you can't expect them to come to the church for choir rehearsal, Bible study, and all that stuff throughout the week. That's not happening anymore. But they might Zoom in. They might log in, because it don't take much to do that. And so we have to start thinking in new ways, reimagining what the new church looks like. And that means killing some sacred cows, that we've held on to for a long time, that have really driven off a newness and a freshness that is so needed for our churches right now. So be prepared, be ready, and look at this as an opportunity to really redo structure, to reimagine our organization and our outreach, and just how we actually do church.
Okay, from the soon to be launched website, www.mirrormefashion.com, owner and CEO, C. Bella. How are you?
I'm doing all right. How about you?
Hanging in there. It's a lot going on. Um,
Yes.
First of all, I'd like to talk about your upcoming website. Where did you get the inspiration from, and go on from there.
Well, the inspiration from Mirror Me Fashion came many years ago when I worked as communications director for a startup company. Um, I had this important title, but I looked young, and being female and being Black, a lot of the like guests that we would have over would assume I was some sort of secretary or administrative staff. And so I started looking into fashion. And when I learned about the styling for the different body shapes, it was like this epiphany that I had. And it was just this moment of realizing, like, why doesn't everyone know this? And then the idea for Mirror Me Fashion built on top of that. But it just came from me looking up how to style myself on my own, in order to dress more professionally at work. And then once I did start to dress more professionally, I mean, it was a instant change. Even walking down the street, I had a young girl one time walk by me. I mean, briefcase in hand, dressed to the nines, and she's like, "Oh, I want to be like her when I grow up," and it just warmed my heart because how you present yourself, especially in professional settings, matters a lot. And it could really do a lot for a person's career.
So, so Mirror Me Fashion is a website soon to be launched. that is geared for women or men, or is it just geared for women?
It's for both. Right now, as a startup, I can only focus on dressing female body shapes. But certainly men won't be neglected when it comes to Marry Me Fashion. It's a lot easier to style men's shapes. And also men aren't as interested as women in fashion. Um, so right now, while I'm building and growing the company, the focus is going to be on women, but it's for not only both genders, but all ages, races, ethnicities. It's for people around the world. Like if you wear clothing, you can be a customer at Marry Me Fashion.
You know, I always tell people, I always say being an entrepreneur takes a little bit more guts sometimes because you're basically working 24 hours a day. You know, there is no hours when it comes to being an entrepreneur.
Like you dream about, if you're really that passionate about your business, you dream about it. Like that's how much, every waking minute, it's like you're thinking about this business, and that's what that's what it is. That's what it most definitely.
What's your feeling regarding bank loans and things of that nature? Do you think it's easier, or what's your feeling regarding access to money being a startup company?
Well, it's challenging because as a startup, see, when you go to a traditional bank, there's several things they want to see. And one of the most important things that a bank is going to want to see is historicals. How can you have historicals or a record of sales and transactions as a startup? You're a startup, you have no sales, you're new in business. And it's one of the main criteria that a bank uses in order to determine whether or not they're going to finance you. And so that's really the biggest challenge. Most banks don't invest in startups. They just don't. And a lot of people, I mean, a person may be able to get like a personal loan and leverage their credit, but then as a minority, that's another question. Do you have good credit? you know, do you have other people supporting you? It's things like that that make it very challenging for a startup business owner to get financing and get the capital necessary in order to grow.
You know, one of the things that I always go to, with where a lot of people on the other side of the aisle really have this thing where Democrats can't be Christians, or Democrats can't be patriotic, or Democrats some kind of way are of the devil. And it's like I always say that they aren't pro-life, they're pro-fetus.
Correct.
You know,
Correct.
what do you think about that?
I mean, it goes back to that issue of conformity. First of all, the notion that evangelicals are, I don't know how to say it, truer or better Christians. I don't know what it is, but I know a lot of Baptists, like Protestant, God-fearing, Black Americans who look at evangelicals and are confused about how they could even align themselves with any of the teachings of Christ and call themselves Christians. Because in a lot of the things that they do are not Christ-like, I guess I would say, including things like, supporting people in need, including things like supporting a president who wants to grab them by the what. So I don't see how it is possible that on the other end you have certain evangelical Christians who ignore the conservative Christian left, because there are a lot of Democrats who are staunch Christians, who are Christian in general. The Republican Party could have actually won over a lot of those voters if they weren't so racial in their messaging. you know But the idea of Republicans as more patriotic or more Christian, I think is absolutely incorrect. But they like to claim, that they like to present themselves as if they're more American, more patriotic, more this than people in the left. And it's just not true, because again, large segments of the left are Christians. We're all patriots. We all believe in democracy. I think believing in democracy is highly patriotic. I don't think I've ever felt so American and proud to be an American since Trump got elected. I don't know, for some reason it sort of reaffirmed. It's like they deny us that right to be an American in a certain sense. And even though I was born in this country, even though my ancestors back generations back, my ancestors were slaves. My ancestors built this country, but they want to make us seem like, we're the terrible stepkid. And in some ways, I guess we are, but
I think there's large portions of their electorate that see what Mitch McConnell is doing, see what Donald Trump did, see what Bill Barr was doing, see what Michael Flynn did, and I think they don't care. Like I think that because Mitch McConnell can block something that is good for them. Like right now, I just did a segment on West Virginia, how the bridges and stuff like that are cracked and are damaged, but yet even if it's for them, they don't care. Like, or do they care? Please, somebody out there, let me know. Because how can you allow Mitch McConnell to get away with stuff like that, or Donald Trump?
it's a very strange thing. It's a very strange thing, because a lot of these Republicans is like, like hating Democrats is like cutting off your nose to spite your face. Like a lot of Republicans are actually working class folks who would benefit from a lot of the um policy positions, a lot of the legislation that the Democrats try to put forward and that are being blocked. But one of the things I do wonder about is that message getting across? Because again, Democrats don't yell from the mountaintops, hey, look at these nutso people and what they're trying to do. And when you don't explicitly say that to people, a lot can be missed, especially when when you have things like social media, when you have things like Fox News. People did the way, I mean, what's the documentary on Netflix that talks about social media and how it sort of takes you down that rabbit hole, and how it's pretty much feeding you the thing. It's not feeding you news in general, it's feeding you the thing that they think is going to keep you watching. And sometimes that thing could be it can be one issue. And so if you're only getting your news from social media and you have a right-wing view and you're only getting fed right-wing views, you have no idea about what the opposition is thinking, what Democrats are thinking, then it's easy for you to not all the way see what's going on. I mean, look at Fox News is dedicated literally to lies and deceit.
I want
get away with it because some of their viewers only watch Fox News.
I want to have viewers recognize the fact that Amy Coney Barrett, when she was picked to be the Supreme Court nominee, the Christian evangelical right were the ones who were pushing for her nomination based on abortion.
Correct.
I mean, they went all out for her. And it didn't faze them at all that Donald Trump was the one that was appointing her. There's so many things that we can point to. I mean, we don't have time in this segment, but there's so many things that just was not Christian, if you will.
This was like a decade ago, right? I'm at this bar and I wound up getting into like this heated political debate with this white guy. And one of the points that he tried to make is that, listen, Democrats are emotional voters. They're not voting based on their wallets. They're voting because they believe somehow that, that uh, the government is going to pay for everything. Like, in other words, we're not as responsible money wise as the Republican Party. And I had to turn to him and I had to say, all people are emotional voters. All people. And Republicans are also in their they believe themselves to be fiscally responsible people who, they're supporting the Republican Party because the Republican Party is the party who is about money and growing the economy and things like that, even though sometimes they're not always giving away free stuff. I mean, that's the small government, things like that. This is the thing that they're implanting in the heads of their voters. Republicanism has branded itself as the party of smarter people, people who are more responsible, people who are more mature, when they're absolutely none of those things. This is the party who supports corporations who are going to steal wealth. You want to talk about wealth redistribution? What about when large corporations, don't pay their fair share of taxes, and we're left with scraps, and we're having to work 2 and 3 jobs just to barely make it by. I mean, and then when the economy busts and then those assets get taken by a wealthier person, that's wealth redistribution. Not somebody who is in need of social services, who's in need of welfare, quote unquote, and who has paid their taxes and paid to get those benefits.
Really quick, I just want to, this will be the last thing. I just want to point out that taxes is, everybody, and that's what's so weird about some of the thinking in the Republican Party. They always want to talk about socialism. When this whole thing, this whole policy money issue thing is based on socialism. Why? Because we all pay taxes and it goes into a pool, and they use that pool to do government services for the people. And when there's a Democratic president, it leans left. When there's a Republican president, it leans right. And they get all caught up in socialism when they should think that this is, when you say the word socialism, it just everybody on the right goes crazy. But nobody has the intellectual ability to understand that the tax system that we pay to the government and to the states and to the county is all a big pool, and it's a distribution of wealth depending on who is in office.
Correct. I mean, I think it's also crazy that they're sitting there, up in arms about socialism, but yet a communist dictator. I mean, I know Russia isn't supposedly a communist country anymore, but certainly they still, Putin still holds those views.
Right.
And you outcry about socialism, but yet you're okay with this, with the president buddying up with this communist. Taxes, I mean, it's just, I don't understand the people don't get the basic concept. I actually agree that taxes should remain shouldn't go up but so high. Taxes don't need to be astronomical.
That's
in
right.
the United States, though, compared to other countries, we pay one of the lowest tax rates. There are countries paying, 40, 50, 60% in taxes.
Isn't
That's freaking wealth redistribution.
Isn't it weird, like the state of New York, that is a blue state, has some of the highest taxes, but yet we're Democrats. The whole state mostly is Democrats. Now you got a state, a red state, who I'm not saying hardly pays, everybody pays their taxes, but the taxes aren't nowhere near as high as New York. and they're complaining, talking about, tax hikes. There's a whole debate in their state about tax hikes when tax hikes don't even, to compare to New York, it doesn't even compare to New York.
We have to pay, we have to contribute something in order to, as a society, to have certain services provided to us. It's just the way it goes. I mean, if you don't pay your taxes, like who's gonna, how do you pay for police, the fire department, your local school? These are things that, as a society, it dictates the quality of life. I'm sorry, but government has its role, and it's important. I don't believe that government should control everything, especially things like a woman's right to choose, for example. But government definitely is important and can play an important role. But it's a quality of life issue. You pay into, you make your contribution so that we're all okay. We're a society. I mean, it's really not that complicated.
I will say I am one of those Democrats who definitely don't believe in taxes being too high. That's a whole nother segment. Yeah, no. But I mean, but
I'm down with paying some taxes, but let's keep it low. Let's not.
We got to come back and talk about taxes on a corporate level. We got to talk about a lot of different things that's.
Watch, as soon as I get rich, that's when the tax rate, the corporate tax rate is gonna skyrocket. Like, oh man.
But hey, listen, you know what? We'll have you back. We'll have a whole forum about real policy issues that we should be discussing, not this crazy stuff on the right, because they have went crazy over there, and we have to talk about that. But anyway. So what's next with Mirror Me Fashion? What are the next steps you'll be taking?
So right now with Mirror Me Fashion, the main thing is just really launching and putting myself out there. So I'm really looking forward to making my first official introduction to the public. I mean, the website is up, it's out there, but it's not at a state where I can actually go out and publicize Mirror Me Fashion. So it's really just getting to that step. And I'm really excited about getting feedback from people from the first time. I mean, I have friends that I've told about Mirror Me Fashion. They go, they visit the site. Oh, it's great, it's awesome. But putting myself out there, getting the site launched, and actually hearing back from people and having them, use Mirror Me Fashion, experience the site and things like that, that's really gonna be, that's something that I look forward to.
So I guess that's what the people have to do. People go to the site, look around, check it out, and get some feedback in.
Absolutely, exactly. And that's important to say. Like when you go to Mirror Me Fashion, I want to hear from you. Like if you're viewing this video, go to mirrormefashion.com, explore every facet of the site. And after you've done that, send me your feedback. Tell me what you like, dislike, what you want to see. If you were confused about something, like your feedback is valuable and it'll help me to build, an experience that is suitable for all people.
It's been great having you here. I wish you a whole lot of luck on your website. Make sure you go there and give us some feedback.
Absolutely.
Thanks for being here.
You're absolutely welcome. My pleasure.
All right.